Good morning, YouTube. Let's talk about unholy damage in the Uldir raid tier. As it stands, unholy's in a good spot. A very good spot. We do substantial single target and even better AoE burst. Ebb and Fever combined with Pestilence will net some pretty nasty AoE damage on a lot of these bosses. Mother, the oozes that spawn, Vectis, the add that spawns, Zekvaz, all the big adds that spawn, and the little Siliptid warriors that spawn. Ebb and Fever will last just long enough for Zekvaz. It'll last just long enough for Zool. It'll last just long enough for Vectis. It lasts perfectly the length for almost every boss in this fight. Pestilence, in my opinion, is, I would still say, the better of all of them, mainly because I do not like the playstyle of Epidemic, and I refuse to use Defile. Primarily because it covers up spell effects on the ground, which makes it really hard for yourself and your teammates to see what's going on, which obviously is a very bad design for an ability. Hopefully they'll fix that in the future, but as of now, I will not take Defile. Pestilence will allow for slightly higher AoE burst, and the playstyle, in my opinion, as I stated, is better simply because you'll be using more death coils, reducing dark transform more frequently, and you'll be able to use more death strikes in the event that you really need to get yourself topped off. All Will Serve does a small amount of cleave this expansion, and as of the current state of DK for Unholy, haste over crit is currently the best. Your sims will obviously change as you gear up, and mine are fairly close. Haste is still top, but crit and burst are pretty much right there with it. Mastery is dead last, and it is not a good stat at the moment. So next up, your 58 tier really has no good value in it. Death Reach is pretty strong on the Zool fight, to where you can grip a Blood Hexer from a mile away. On 60, Soul Reaper is definitively the best talent in this tier. It both does more single target, and you can get really good value out of it on adds. So if you kill an add while Soul Reaper is active on it, you get 10% haste for 8 seconds, which you can use fairly effectively on a lot of these adds that die fairly quickly. So if you time it well and are experienced with it, you can kill an add and then have the buff afterwards with Soul Reaper. In addition to that, will make your opening burst quite a bit more reliable. For the next tier, so survivability tier, Spell Leader, in my opinion, is the best of all of the abilities. You can get quite a bit of value out of it. Talok, let's say you have the blood on you. You can go run it out, pop AMS, and literally just stand in the blood. You won't take any damage, and it'll clean up blood way better. Mother, pop it. You can go through the gate, take 0 damage. Fetid, not really useful. Zekvaz, let's say you have a Roiling Deceit on yourself, and it's overlapping with the donuts. You can go ahead and stand on the donut, drop it somewhere safe, and take no damage. Vectis, let's say you have 2, possibly even 3 Omega Vectors late into the fight. Pop, AMS, take 0 damage. Zool, maybe during second phase, when he starts dropping stuff on the ground, you can get pretty good value out of it. Mithrax, most of the stuff in this game is avoidable. You can use it to avoid the big ability he does, Imminent Ruin. You can use it to pretty much negate all damage from Imminent Ruin. Gahoon, nothing super useful. A lot of these fights can just be damage avoided, but so far Spell Eater will give you more value than Death Pact. The next tier, Pestilence, better AoE burst on a 30-second cooldown, which, let's say Zekvaz is where, in my opinion, this shines the most. Zekvaz, you get a lot of value out of Pestilence. When the Siliptid warriors spawn up and you group them all up, drop Death and Decay and start smashing Scourge Strike, you'll occasionally get a proc from your Pestilence, giving it another wound, and deal a substantial amount of AoE damage, which, once again, Unholy DK shines in AoE Burst. The final tier, Unholy Frenzy, is still our best talent. It makes the entire rotation just smooth. More haste is always good, because haste is hard to find at the moment, and it is by far our best value stat. And it applies wounds during its active, which, at the moment, you want to burn out to 0 wounds prior to Festering Strike. So, the more globals that are spent Scourge Striking, the smoother your rotation will be, and the higher your DPS will be. If you start pooling up the wounds, you'll be doing less damage, and you'll find your rotation gets more clunky, because you won't be regenerating runes as often, and you'll have 2 at a time on cooldown, which, if you have 1 rune coming up every couple of seconds, it's way better than having 2 runes coming up on a long cooldown. Alright, so as far as actually dealing the damage, that's what we're all here for, right? We're going to assume that we're going to be lusting on pull, so you always want to save army for lust. I don't think there's really any fights that go over 8 minutes. Maybe if your overall raid has low damage for Zekvaz, you might make it to 8 minutes. But that's a very rare scenario. Usually you'll go about 7 minutes on him. So once again, we're going to assume lust on pull. So at about the 7 to 5 second mark of the pre-pull, you want to go ahead and pop army. So we'll go ahead and pop army here. You want to pre-pot so that you have a second potion available later on the fight. So we'll hit that pre-pot. We're going to assume lust. Get your dot out there. Go ahead and hit him with 1 Festering Wound. Pop your APOC as soon as you can. Pretty much get all your cooldowns rolling, and then burn out on your wounds. Do not cap runic power. That is one of your prime directives here. That was a pretty solid opener. Hit right about 25k without having re-origination or stamina, or correction, strength buffs, having really any buff available. Not too shabby. Usually you'll hit about 31 to 32k on your opener. DK opener is pretty fucking strong right now. Definitely a strong opener. So, when we open, our very first ability is going to be Unholy Frenzy, just so we can start building those wounds. You'll pretty much always hit 1 Festering Strike, and that'll either put you just enough to go ahead and use your APOC at 4 wounds, or if you don't get lucky and hit only 2, meaning you'll have 3 total wounds, just go ahead and pop your Dark Transform, go ahead and hit your Soul Reaper. You can wait like 1 second total for APOC to be available, because you'll build that 1 extra wound up from your auto attacks while Unholy Frenzy is active. Go ahead and hit your APOC. Go ahead and hit another Festering Strike, because you don't want to cap runes also, and during your burst phase, especially with Lust active, you're going to be going very quickly to cap your runes again. So don't cap runes. Use Soul Reaper effectively, which you want to use Soul Reaper usually when you have less than 2, because it gives you 2 immediately. Yeah, that's the majority of the rotation. It's not a very difficult rotation. And then you definitely want to be burning out on wounds prior to renewing new wounds. You don't want to spend that many globals and runes on Festering Strike. You want to spend as many runes as possible on Scourge Strike. Burn out to 0, reapply wounds, burn out to 0, reapply wounds, burn out to 0. Alright, so let's talk about your AoE rotation now. AoE is going to be a bit different than your normal rotation. Let's say you're doing Zekvaz, right? And the Silithid warriors come out, everybody groups them up, and you get a stun. So these are our little Silithid warriors going out here. Go ahead and hit them with the Outbreak as soon as they spawn. Get your ghoul on them. A lot of the times I'll have Dark Transform at the same time. Go ahead and drop your Death and Decay and just start smacking them with Scourge Strike. Don't even bother to put on any wounds to them. Any wounds they can apply, perfect, even better. Otherwise, don't bother. Whenever Death and Decay is down, ideally you want to burn out your runic power prior so that you can get more runes prior to Death and Decay. Drop Death and Decay, and then just start smacking them with Scourge Strike. You don't really care about the amount of wounds you have on your target when you're doing a mass AoE. All of your damage is going to come from cleaving Scourge and having Ebon Fever applied. Yeah, that's about really all there is to it. AoE, depending on the size, like if you're doing 1 to 2 targets, sure, you want to stay up to date with your wounds on them. But if you're doing a mass AoE, just put Outbreak on them, drop Death and Decay, empower your ghoul if available, and then only Scourge Strike on big AoE pulls. Other than that, once again, burn out your wounds, hit them with a Festering Strike, burn out your wounds. Rinse and repeat, and have some form of ability tracker so that you can look at what abilities you have coming. Weakauras are fantastic for this. Other add-ons are available, but I highly recommend weakauras. Little wigs and big wigs are also a great add-on to have, and tweaking them, don't know why it's not going to work, there we go. Tweaking them to certain bosses too is really great. For Uranium, my guild, I do raid leading, so I like to customize what I am seeing. We don't need to see everything, we just need to see most of it. Alright, next up. So, when you want to min-max your damage, simming will be the way you do that, in addition to using Pawn. So, go get the Simulation Craft add-on, and once it's installed, you can type /simc. That's going to go ahead and give you a output. That output can either be used in the Simulation Craft add-on itself, or you can just go to the Raidbots website, which is a cloud-hosted Simulation Craft, and at that point, you can just go ahead and paste it and say a quick sim right here, and it'll run a quick sim after a couple of minutes. So that is going to give you a output, especially if you have stat weights, which you really want to do at least once. I mean, every time you get a change of gear, I would recommend doing it if you're really looking for min-max, but having your own personalized stat weights is super important, because as one stat rises, the value of it will diminish, and the value of other stats will begin to rise. So you're going to find that balance to where you don't have too much of one stat or not enough of one stat. So after you get your stat output right here, go ahead, after you have Pawn installed, and you want to have manual, come to weights, and then you can input these values into your Pawn. And at that point, it's going to show you what is best. So let's go ahead and just swap out a ring. So it's showing you your best and second best for rings. Now we can go through here and we can look at what pieces are upgrades and what pieces are downgrades. So for now, my 340 ring, sadly, is the biggest upgrade I can get. Alright, next up, Blood Mallet. Blood Mallet will tell you what trinkets and azurite pieces and traits are the best. So Archive of the Titan and Laser Matrix are pretty much the two go-tos. They are the best in the game at the moment. You'll get all of those from the Uldir raid. So let's look at trinkets. As of now, at the time of recording, where is it? Dark Moon deck Fathoms is still one of the highest parsing ability, or highest parsing trinkets in the game. Netting nearly the same as, let's say, a Doom Fury. In addition to that, the reason it does so well is because for Unholy, as long as you have a pet attacking something, the Dark Moon Fathoms will hit them. So if you're having to run around, do other mechanics, it's still great because you're still getting worth out of Fathoms. Yep, so you can just look and compare. Obviously, you can sim them yourself if you really like to, but for the most part, these are extremely accurate and very reliable. That's really all there is to dealing damage as Unholy. It's not extremely complicated. Granted, most specs in the game now are a little simplified. Yeah, just sim yourself frequently. Try to get more practice on bosses so you can line up your cooldowns better. Because after you kill a boss, you really are looking for your parse to get better, and you want to time your cooldowns better as you do these bosses more and more. Alright, very soon I'll have more guides on individual bosses, little short videos on how I do them. Oh, I almost forgot one thing. So, if you have not done it yet, I highly recommend going to the weakauras Discord. Up there you'll find pretty much the meta crafting for Unholy damage. You'll be able to ask questions, look at pinned guides for abilities, and you'll have people that are clearing the higher content be able to give you more in-depth detail over everything. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, you guys have a fantastic afternoon.